I'm very delighted to be here with Community Child Care Co-op. You might have thought I was working in the catering department, but no, actually, this is my proper job. I have a privilege today to be able to introduce someone who's very special to us, Associate Professor Alma Fleet. Alma Fleet, as many of you know so well, works with developing teachers at the Institute of Early Childhood at the famous Macquarie University, Sydney. Having been a teacher with children herself, Alma greatly enjoys teaching within the university and with those working with children in both prior to school and school settings. She has a particular commitment to teacher education for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and student teachers. She values relationships and connectedness and challenges people to engage with children in ways based on listening, respect, enjoyment and intellectual challenge. Her research and publishing interests focus on educational change, particularly in relation to practitioner inquiry. Her most recent articles are in Reflective Practice and the Australian Journal of Teacher Education, while her current book is Conversations Behind Early Childhood Pedagogical Documentation, co-authored and edited with Catherine Patterson and Janet Robertson, and that's published by Padamelon Press. Currently, she's assisting educators who are thinking through new roles in educational leadership. So a warm welcome, please, Alma Fleet, When the Pendulum Swings Too Fast.
It's absolutely delightful, and it was a privilege to be introduced by Helen because I actually worked with her in one of the services where she was directing some years ago, and that was great fun. So it's lovely to see the cycles go around. It is a treat to see you all here and to be part of this. It is an honor. And we're now actually going to go from very big ideas to some very daily practicalities. So if your minds are swirling around up there, you can just let them unwind a little bit with the afternoon and get into the day-to-day, because that's what we're going to do shortly. First of all, though, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians, the Gadigal people, and the Eora Nation, and all of the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are with us today, particularly some of my very dear friends who are here and I was pleased to actually see. I would also like to acknowledge Community Child Care. I think this idea has been absolutely spectacular. The day has been wonderful. And the contribution that this organization makes to the sector is very special. It's a role that you've held on to. And finally, I'd also like to thank all those who've contributed to my thinking and generously given up their time and ideas, because I don't get these inspirations just on my own. They come from talking with many of you and with visiting many of your places of work and sharing in your thinking, and that's a step up for me, and I enjoy that. Now, I debated briefly earlier this morning as I was listening to some of the speakers about being embarrassed about what I'm just about to do, because there's this focus on daily decisions that I'm doing, and other people have been out there changing the world. But then I decided, no, I'm going to be proud of a focus on enactment and on doing things, and hope that that works for you. So we'll see how we go. Now, I just have to decide which of these actually means forward and which means back. If you're not quite sure about the logo, that's actually a pendulum. And if you're trying to do any kind of a presentation on a pendulum, you know, a nice swing, try Googling it and see what you get, because some of you may know the story by Edgar Allan Poe about the pit and the pendulum, and what you get is this almost dripping with blood, big black thing going from up top that's about to kill somebody. And I thought, no, what I have to say isn't quite that drastic. Okay. So we have a gentle pendulum swing that we're being aware of. My acknowledgements, thank you. And what I want to talk with us about briefly today is some really good ideas that have gotten out of control. Right. Well, you're with me on that one. That's nice. Now, this problem that we currently have in terms of structuring, programming, planning, and professional decision-making around photographs and children's interests is interesting, but we need to rethink it. And one of the problems here is that some people are of the impression this is precisely what my colleagues and myself have been suggesting to many of you do for the last 10 years. And now we're saying, no, actually, the pendulum has probably swung too far. So let's just see what's happened here. And I think if we listen to our colleagues in Reggio and Emilia, they would say, depende da molto cosa. Simply, it depends which photographs, when you're using them, when we're talking about children's interests, and it is not an across-the-board way of behaving. There are a few elements that are actually missing from the equation. So, let's see now. What are the problem with photographs? Nothing at all, depending what you're taking and what you're using them for and how you're using them. But some of you may remember, which I think is very funny because it was Community Child Care 20th birthday in 1998. So 15 years ago, Catherine Patterson and I were offering a little workshop at the ECA conference in Adelaide. We've been asked to share a story today, and so this is mine. We had the normal feelings that you do in a conference, wondering if anybody would show up or if anybody was interested in what we had to offer. And we were dawdling over our cup of tea, and we couldn't get in the room. The corridor outside the workshop room was wall-to-wall people, and we couldn't get from the tea place into the room to give the workshop. And we were giving a little session that was called Beyond the Boxes. And the organizers very quickly and professionally rearranged their lives and took half the people out and made us repeat the session afterwards and run it again and all those sorts of things. But all that interest was generated because we were saying, actually, that there are some issues with what we were doing then. And I'm going to explain this little image, which came out of the article that was then published called Beyond the Boxes, which was generated at a time when we were concerned that everybody was programming in these grids, and some of you we taught how to do the grids, and I'm really sorry to have changed my mind. Yeah, hey, I'm a change specialist, I'm allowed to do that. So you get a little grid, and developmental domains and days of the week, and you throw in dough or something. Well, there are some issues with that, and this is where the issue comes from, and I've got the little oops there because we were asked not to also talk about our writing or our books, which has already been mentioned and which was for sale, which we're not allowed to comment on. So I just thought I'd put up this little thing, because the thing that interests me about it from 1998, and it's not very clear up here because I just skimmed it out of the article, is that the frame is exactly the same. 15 years later, the framework that we were talking about is exactly the same. We're talking about the importance of the teacher's personal and professional self in a socio-political framework, taking notice of what's going on around us, swirling around all these various factors that influence the interaction between educators and children and families that are in the center of something which is constantly evolving, about which we must be thinking. Same as. So what was the problem? The problem was that everything was in these little boxes. So we were joining this throng of people, we weren't the only ones, who were saying that we needed to bear in mind, certainly consider, bear in mind developmental domains, of course, but to move beyond those as limits, have them as a contextual framework, if you like, But to think in terms of planning webs, think in terms of multiple ways of recording. Everybody should not be restricted to the same ways of recording. It's not legislated the way you record. What's legislated is that you're supposed to think. It doesn't tell you how you're going to think. And to actually listen to children. This was absolutely solid research-based advice. But what went wrong? When we gave this invitation to people to move beyond the boxes, the sector gleefully jumped out of this expectation of programming in the boxes and into a photograph album. People like to be contained in something that's safe, and the photograph album made people feel good. It reminded them of their families. It reminded them of birthday parties. It was all marvelous and useless, and that's a shame, really. So suddenly, with this swing of the pendulum, we had photographs everywhere. We somehow lost thoughtful interpretations. Out with the baby in the bathwater went implications that came from these photographs. We lost, therefore, why it mattered. Or if you like, we're left with a very large so what? Here are all these photographs. Happy snaps belong in photo albums. The basic cycle that many of us were taught or taught you is exactly the same in terms of the importance of seeing something, call it an observation if you like, interpreting it, i.e. thinking about it, and planning an implication. The cycle is the same. The principles are the same. But it requires you to actually think about what you're doing. Everybody can do that. Fine. So, with these photographs, what we need is carefully selected, not millions, analyzed, not just stuck up, photographs which they can record ordinary moments in the day, and from there they can evolve into useful documents that support decision making. They should be doing something. So generally, as a little thumbnail rule, if the child is staring at you and smiling, you don't take a picture. That's a birthday party. This is a birthday party. We can all smile. There have been a lot of photos taken. But if you want to capture something, it's the moment of concern, it's the moment of interest, it's the reaching for something unexpected. You're looking for things that you wouldn't have seen without the camera, if you're using it for decision making. And certainly, that doesn't stop the recording of life in the center. That's still important. That's still important. But it's a different purpose. And we can't kid ourselves into thinking that the photographs which record the life in the center are the fundamental point for decision making and planning. They are not. They are doing something else. Okay, fine. Now what's the other problem? The related other problem is a misunderstanding of the challenges from Reggio, Emilia. And people who get stuck on an airplane with me or a train have to sit and listen to me babble about Reggio for an extended period of time. So I've not gone off the idea. You know, in 1994, when I first went to Reggio, Emilia, and I came back and I was blah, 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 somebody said to my husband, "Don't worry, she'll get over it." Not yet. But we have to know what that provocation is and understand it. Nobody in Italy said all of your planning should be based on the children's interests. This is a misinterpretation of what that provocation is all about. That provocation can be introduced in a 400-page book. It is not something which can be picked up in a few quick phrases or a few quick decisions. We are interested in children's interests, but when we're watching, we're listening, we're trying to seek understanding of a different point of view from our own. And this is a shift in philosophy about the way pedagogy works. In the past, the adult had the ideas and transferred them to the child. What we are saying now is that we need to know where the child is coming from, what's in the child's head, what's important to the child, certainly what they're interested in, but it's their perspective that we're interested in. What are they seeing? What do they actually see when they come into your space? What are they hearing? What are they smelling? What are they doing? What does the world look like from their side of this exchange and encounter? That's what we're trying to do here, and somehow or other, the phrase children's interests has become a placeholder for understanding children. It's not the same thing. The pendulum's gone too far. All right, so what kind of content are we talking about? What should we be teaching? If we're not just doing children's interests, where's the content actually coming from? Well, it's not coming from there, that's for sure. Well, you can choose one of those slides and look at it. Fine. Now let's just go back to, I have no idea why I did that. Yeah, except this doesn't want to move it from here. Do you want to come move it? You can still do that. You can knock the water over. It's not doing anything. That's only the first 6. Hey guys, I've got more. Just keep talking. No, I can't keep talking because the next one is a picture. You can imagine what comes next. Where do you think, I could ask you to do that, where do you think the content comes from? I've shown you the picture. Content can come from things you're interested in. Oh, aren't you good?
You never said that fast.
She insists that I said she would be better off working for Grace Brothers. I taught Leanne, and I'm sure that what I actually said was that if she didn't pay more attention to what I was saying, we've managed to resolve that little problem. Very, very fond. Your content might come from something that you're actually interested in, your hobbies. Parents' initiatives can be a source of content, something that reflects your local community, something that they value. Something that's just a center event. It might be the birthday. Fine. It might be a community celebration of something that's special in the area. It's something that could be expected curriculum, and we know what that is. And it could be what you noticed yesterday or the day before, happening by, with, or between children and the environment. Now, I'm going to hit this really quickly and see if it does one slide. Regardless of the source of the content, and you do want breadth, ideally you would be getting content from all of those various sources in putting together your curriculum. It would not be predetermined, it would not be downloaded, it would not be bought from anybody who's trying to sell it to you. It doesn't matter how clever they are not you, they do not know your children, they do not know your community, you have to make it up. That's why you have to think. Right. Okay, so our task is to see the child's voice within whatever it is that you're looking at. And certainly you're following up what interests them, but you're trying to see their perspective about whatever it is that you're doing. And to do that, you have to listen more, you have to look more, to think. Good. So, things like this. They'll ask, or you can ask, why do we have a drought, or a flood, or a fire? Children are very, very interested in what's going on around them, and we make a mistake if we limit them to the little boring things that we think little people might be interested in. They're interested in the same things everybody else in the community is interested in, particularly if it's catastrophic. And so you need to do something about dealing with that, apart from anything else, to help them deal with the unexpected and fear and all the other crises that go with the sorts of events we've been having lately. Some of them are going to be wanting to be writing and reading, and you need to recognize that. You do not need a literacy program. You need to support their natural curiosity about communication. The way literacy is defined in the early years learning framework gives you permission to do absolutely anything in terms of dance, drama, music, puppets. Go for it. They want to do that. And more important, why don't I have any friends? If I crawl after you, will you notice me? That is curriculum. And we need to be noticing it, and it's not an interest, it's a concern. It's the child's perspective. So, the provocations are to see photographs as data, as evidence, in fact, that supports thinking, revisiting, conversations, and so on. You can read that, because I haven't talked quite fast enough and I'm almost out of time. Okay, I'll read it to you then. So that you're seeing photographs as data, evidence that supports your thinking, revisiting, conversations. That's different from the photo montage, but it's powerful because these are images which are purposely selected and annotated. They need to be annotated. They at least need to be dated but you need to write down why you've chosen them. There's no point writing down that Susie's playing in the sand. You can see Susie's playing in the sand. Who are you talking to when you write down these ridiculous things? Okay, so what you're trying to do is provoke consideration of things that people aren't thinking about. That's what you're doing. You're looking beyond the obvious. All right, so you're becoming more sensitive to children's points of view. You're looking for unfolding hypotheses. This is children's theory making. Children have theories all the time. Newborns have theories about what on earth is going on around them. They were so contented. Now there are all these bright lights and noise. What is happening? Children have theories about what's going on around them. And we need to work alongside them to support their evolving thinking. So, we're moving beyond just recording a label like dinosaurs or playing in the sand, and we're trying to hear the questions, and now you fall in love with the colon. Now, some of you at a particular kind of education didn't know that you had to understand colons and semicolons. You do, and I'll show you why. Now, this is because you need to title what you're doing. This might remind some of you of pedagogical documentation. I know it's hard to say, and I know it's a very thick book, and I won't mention it, but if you're telling a narrative about something which matters, let's call it pedagogical documentation, and you put a title on it, the title underlies what's important. The title is not a label. If you use a colon, it'll remind you to think about why it matters. One half, the bit before the colon or the bit after the colon, could be something a child said or something children did, or it could be your interpretation of what it is. But if you try to think about that title, it'll remind you why it's important. And if there's nothing sensible to say about those photographs, just give them to the family at the end of the day and move on. Don't use them as something which you're pretending is important. So, it's not just playing with bikes, but what was interesting about it? You watch and you watch and you watch and you see, I know what they were doing. They were exploring speed and they were exploring control. Now the person who just looks at the people with the bikes doesn't know that. Because you are knowledgeable, you know that. So stick it in the title. Fine. All right, building towers, sure. But what's interesting about that is that they keep coming back when they crash over and they try again. Crashes over, try again. What's interesting about it is the persistence and the resilience. So that it can go before the colon if you'd rather, or it can go after. That's your only choice. You have to have something before and something after. There are no rules with this. This is just according to Alma. It's okay. Now, loving painting. Yes, right. Okay. Why is this little group consistently going to the painting? They're not painting the same thing. They're using different colors in different ways. The light splashes, they're merging them. And the colors they're using seems to reflect the way they feel. It's something about color and emotion. You don't know quite what it is, but you want to worry about it a bit. So you're going to stick it up on, this is what we were doing today, and it's unfolding as you go along. All right. So, quietness, finding time to think and read. Sometimes we don't do a lot of that, and I think we should, so I just threw that up there because I'm a book person. Now, so we're letting this pendulum swing just settle a little bit. And we look at our mantra here from the Early Years Learning Framework. As children participate in everyday life, they develop interests and construct their own identities and understandings of the world. What I'm challenging you is to hear the other words in that provocation besides interests. Everyday life, construct, identities, understandings of the world. Some people are only looking at the lists in the back of that document. Forget the lists. Read the words. And thank you very much.